It was supposed to revolutionize jet engines. Instead, it bankrupted Rolls-Royce and nearly took down Lockheed with it. This is the deadly truth about the RB211, the billion-dollar mistake that wouldn't stay grounded. It started like all great disasters do, with a bold idea and way too much confidence. The year was 1966. The airline industry was exploding. Everyone wants bigger planes, longer ranges, and quieter engines that didn't sound like thunder rolling through your luggage. Enter Lockheed, with a sleek, new wide-body airliner called the L-1011 TriStar. And they needed an engine. Not just any engine, a revolutionary one. Rolls-Royce raised their hand. We've got something better than revolutionary. We've got triple spool. And just like that, the RB211 was born. It was going to be the most advanced commercial engine in the world. 3 spools instead of 2, lighter carbon fiber fan blades, insane fuel efficiency, smooth thrust delivery, whisper quiet at cruising speed. A dream engine. There was just one problem. It didn't work. Back in the late 60s, this thing sounded like magic on paper. The triple spool layout meant better control of airflow, greater stability, and faster response across different altitudes and speeds. The carbon fiber fan blades, branded Hyfil, promised dramatic weight savings. Lockheed was impressed. The British government was thrilled. Airlines lined up to place orders. Rolls-Royce, meanwhile, was riding high. They weren't just going to compete with General Electric and Pratt & Whitney. They were going to crush them. They just had to build it. But here's the thing about dream engines. They tend to crash into reality at Mach 0.85. Because while the RB211 looked great on paper, it was basically a napkin sketch stretched into a billion-dollar production line. Rolls-Royce promised too much, too soon. The Hyfil blades couldn't survive bird strikes. The triple spool layout was more complex than a Swiss watch dipped in jet fuel. And the company started missing deadlines faster than they could announce new ones. Costs ballooned, engineers were pulling all-nighters, Lockheed was getting nervous, and by 1970, the dream was slipping through their fingers. What was meant to be a jet engine of the future had become a financial black hole. And it was just getting started. You know you're in trouble when your engine prototype fails its first bird strike test by exploding. That's exactly what happened to the RB211. See, one of the RB211's big selling points was its weight-saving carbon fiber fan blades. They were called Hyfil and Rolls-Royce loved them. They were lighter than metal, super strong, and just futuristic enough to impress airline execs and boardrooms. There was only one problem. Birds. In early testing, a bird was fired into the engine. Standard procedure. Instead of denting a blade or passing through like with most engines, the Hyfil blade shattered. Not cracked, shattered. Think confetti cannon at 10,000 RPM. This wasn't just a hiccup. It was catastrophic because the RB211 had been designed around those carbon fiber blades. Every calculation, every weight ratio, every balance point hinged on them. Switching to titanium. Heavier, slower, more expensive. It threw the whole engine out of spec. But the fan blade problem was just one line in a growing list of issues. The triple spoon design. Brilliant in theory. In practice, a nightmare to build. You had 3 rotating shafts nested inside one another, spinning at different speeds, all sharing the same narrow tube of space. Getting that to work required tolerance tighter than a Swiss watch and cooling systems that wouldn't melt at full throttle. Oh, and did we mention vibration? The RB211 vibrated like a lawnmower with a grudge. The engine was literally shaking itself apart during early test runs. Bearings wore out in hours instead of months, shafts bent under stress, and engineers were left chasing gremlins through the design with nothing but slide rules and aspirin. Meanwhile, Rolls-Royce kept saying everything was fine. They were this close to fixing it. They just needed a little more time, and a little more money, and a little more of both. Spoiler, they didn't have either. Lockheed, the customer depending on this engine to make the L-1011 fly, started panicking. The US government, which had back loans tied to the aircraft, started sweating. And Rolls-Royce, they kept spending. Burned through £170 million in a matter of months. Every test that failed meant another redesign. Every redesign pushed delivery back. every delay killed trust, it was like death by 8,000 technical memos. And beneath it all, the terrifying truth. The RB211 wasn't just a little behind schedule, it was spiraling out of control, one bird strike at a time. By early 1971, Rolls-Royce had officially run out of runway and cash. The RB211 program had gone from an ambitious leap forward to a flaming hole in the balance sheet. What started as a competitive bid to power the next generation of wide-body aircraft had become an open-ended money pit. The company was hemorrhaging funds, deadlines were evaporating, and the technical problems weren't shrinking. They were multiplying. In February, Rolls-Royce did something no one thought was possible. They went bankrupt. Yes, Rolls-Royce. The same company that made Merlin engines for Spitfires, the same company that was a crown jewel of British industry, that broke. The RB211 had done what enemy aircraft in 2 world wars couldn't. It brought Rolls-Royce to its knees. It wasn't just an engineering failure, it was a national embarrassment. At the time, Rolls-Royce wasn't just a company, it was the company, a symbol of precision, reliability, and craftsmanship. So when it collapsed, it didn't just rattle investors, it shook Parliament. The UK government had no choice. Letting Rolls-Royce fail completely would have meant thousands of jobs losses, a total collapse of the L-1011 program, and a major blow to British aerospace credibility. So they stepped in hard. On February 4, 1971, the British government nationalized Rolls-Royce. The engine division was carved out, debts were wiped clean, and the RB211 program somehow was allowed to continue. It was like performing emergency surgery on a patient and the operating table at the same time. Lockheed, meanwhile, was teetering. Their L-1011 TriStar was designed exclusively around the RB211. There was no plan B. Switching engines at that stage would have meant redesigning the entire aircraft from pylon to plumbing, and GE and Pratt & Whitney weren't exactly offering help. So they waited, and they watched as Rolls-Royce tried to piece the RB211 back together using a mix of government money, revised designs, and pure desperation. And here's the kicker. Even after the bankruptcy, even after the bailouts, the engine still didn't work right. Sure, it technically ran, it met minimum thrust levels, it could survive a bird strike, but it still shook too much. It was still overweight, and it still required constant adjustment to stay airworthy. Rolls-Royce called it teething problems. Pilots called it don't trust it over water. It was, quite literally, an engine that had bankrupted its maker and still wasn't ready for prime time. You'd think that after nearly collapsing an entire company, an engine would be double-checked before going into service. Triple-checked even, maybe blessed by a priest. Not the RB211. In 1972, just a year after the government bailed out Rolls-Royce, the RB211-22 finally entered commercial service aboard the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. It worked, kind of. The engine delivered on some of its promises: smooth thrust delivery, solid performance at cruising altitude, and fuel efficiency that, on paper, beat older competitors. Airlines could finally put passengers in the seats and the planes in the air. But underneath the polished nacelles, the problems were still simmering. The RB211-22 was rushed. Engineering fixes were still being tested in real time. And while the engine no longer disintegrated during bird strikes, progress, it still suffered from high wear rates, thermal expansion issues, and a vibration problem that made every flight feel like a washing machine with trust issues. Maintenance crews quickly learned that routine checks meant something very different with this engine. Entire fan modules had to be inspected and swapped more frequently than planned. Spare parts were expensive. Manuals were constantly being rewritten. To be fair, not every RB211 caught fire or fell apart. Many of them worked fine when babied, but even then, the engine's reliability was less bulletproof and more keep toolbox close. And the TriStar, it got caught in the crossfire. The L-1011 was a masterpiece on paper. Wide body comfort, advanced avionics, and one of the smoothest rides in the sky. It should have been a flagship for Lockheed. But thanks to its engine, it turned into an anchor. The L-1011 was designed exclusively for the RB211. No alternative power plant, That decision locked Lockheed's fate to Rolls-Royce's, like two skydivers sharing one questionable parachute. The RB211's delay froze production, sales stalled, Lockheed's cash dried up. In 1973, they needed a $250 million bailout from the US government. Why? Because of an engine. Technically, once the RB211 was tamed, the TriStar became a beloved aircraft. Pilots adored it. But by then, Boeing and McDonnell Douglas had eaten Lockheed's lunch. The L-1011 was brilliant, but it launched with the wrong engine at the worst time. The RB211 entered regular service and brought its baggage with it. It vibrated, it wore out parts fast, it struggled with thermal stress, it sometimes couldn't handle a simple bird strike without needing serious maintenance afterward. One British Airways flight suffered an uncontained failure right after takeoff. Turbine discs separated, shrapnel everywhere. Somehow, the plane landed safely, but that engine, scrap metal. Rolls-Royce kept issuing fixes, upgrades, service bulletins, engineers lost sleep. But to everyone else, the RB211 was a high-maintenance friend who couldn't take a hint. Shockingly, the RB211 didn't die. It evolved. New versions, the 524, the 535, fixed many issues. They powered the 747, the 757. Suddenly, the RB211 was reliable. And then came the Trent engines. And then came the Trent engines, based on RB211 architecture, triple spool, and genuinely world-class. So was the RB211 redeemed? Sort of. It never dominated. It cost a fortune, but it paved the way for something better, at least eventually. The RB211 is a lesson written in titanium, carbon fiber, and burned government cash. It promised too much, it delivered too late, and it cost more than anyone was prepared to spend in money, reputation, and blood pressure. Yet somehow it still flew. And not only that, it evolved. It lived through its teenage years and came out the other side powering some of the most beloved aircraft of the late 20th century. So was it worth it? Maybe, but only if you weren't the one paying the repair bills in 1972. The RB211 proved you can crash an engine program without crashing a plane. Hit the next video. The turbulence isn't over yet.